Hey there, Bible friends. You're tuning in for my second 15-minute version here of Fast Times Through the Intertestamental Period. Now, I know that your notes are diced up a little bit different. I changed the font and setup and all that kind of stuff, but the blanks are still the same. So, oh yeah. So I've got my copy that's like your copy over there, and I'll try to keep in line with that. Hey, just a couple reminders. As we go along, I might refer to some of the pictures and charts and stuff that you got in your handouts. I don't think we'll get to any of this stuff today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the temple, but when we're done, you're going to want to make sure that anything that was in here that's from today, that you get that filled in. Okay, so each day, after the 15 minutes, you're going to go to your intertestamental period matching questions, and you want to put in there, Persian, Greek, Maccabean, Roman period. We'll probably get through most of the Persian period today in our stuff. Okay, back to our notes. We did our introduction, why 400 silent years, and we made our way down to the bottom here, where we're going to discuss the time period between the proclamation of Cyrus in 539, 538, up to the point where we're talking about the Romans taking over. And today, we'll probably spend most of our time talking about what's going on during the Persian period. The Persian period actually covers what goes on in the post-exile books. Esther, Ezra, Nehemiah, and then the last three prophets. We got Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. Those are the ones that we're going to focus on today. I'll maybe read you a little bit of stuff from Josephus, the way that he saw things in his Jewish antiquities. So time period first for this first group, so we saw over here in our overview, Persians to Romans, right? Persian period comes first. We're going to go from 538 to 333. 333 should smell somewhat familiar. That would be very close to the time of Alexander the Great. So the decree of Cyrus, which is recorded at the end of 2 Kings, as well as at the beginning of Nehemiah, rise up and rebuild. And so they're told to go, and they're funded with all the money to do that. Ends the exile, and subsequently the people are allowed to return in three waves. Just as there are three waves of exile, there are three waves of returning. First group under Rubble, and then you've got Ezra, and then Nehemiah, if we're going to take care of them in specific order. But there they are. Zerubbabel, Nehemiah, Ezra. Okay, so what else is in there? Let me make this a little bigger for some of you who need glasses. Book of Esther falls in there. When we did this in our notes, we mentioned that it happens between the visits of Ezra. I believe that's where we put it. Or is between chapter 6 and 7 of Nehemiah? Maybe? Wherever it was. And that deals with the people who stayed in exile. About, the people that lived in Persia and were part of Persian society and even became part of Persian government like Daniel did. You'll graduate sometime. And it is during this period that instead of having Judah as a kingdom, we have Judea as one of the 127 satrapies or counties or whatever districts of the Persian Empire. Initially, Zerubbabel was the secular governor. He was sent to be the governor of Judea. He figured he'd know the customs, he'd know the people, and so it would be a good idea to have him go. He was trusted. He was part of royal family, so he'd have some background in this stuff. Joshua was the religious leader, as we know, high priest. And there was complete freedom of religion. This was the Persian policy. Remember that stele that was sent that had it's making the rounds these days as being one of the first religious toleration or religious freedom documents of the world. Every religion was considered to be valid. There could be, 127 different religions all going at the same time in the Persian Empire. That they were fine with that. As long as you don't cause a fuss, we'll let you worship your God, because they kind of associated gods with territory for whatever reason. So keep the satrapies happy by letting them exercise religion however they want to. That included the Samaritans, the Idumeans, the Judeans, etc. Let's all let them all do their own thing as long as they can get along and be happy. If anybody was rocking the boat there, as the Samaritans accused the Judeans of, hey, they're building this temple, they want to rebel. This is the kind of way that they are. They wanted to be involved in the Judean building of the temple, and they were blocked from that, so they built their own, right? So we do have this rocking the boat, and then there being letters being written, and things didn't go too smoothly there. Nevertheless, we kind of don't know what happened to Rubble. We don't get the rest of his story. He just kind of disappears off the scene. We don't see anything about him written in Malachi, which is obviously later, but he's gone, right? He's there in the story, and then he's gone. Nobody knows. There are some stories that maybe he was assassinated or deposed or just died a normal death. I kind of think he probably just died a normal death. He was a Davidic heir, so maybe he was seen as a means to rebellion, as some of those Samaritans were writing letters about this kind of stuff. I don't know. What we do know is that that it's okay. It's not like Messiah gets cut off because of that, because if you recall, David had two sons. David's one son was Nathan, who didn't become king, and then on down the line you get Mary. That's recorded in the genealogies in Matthew chapter 1 and in Luke. David's other son, Solomon, who did become king, down the line of his sons, you have Jehoiachin, who was cursed in Jeremiah 22, that his seed would not persist. And this is the point where brothers are all reigning, and he's one of the brothers, and no descendants of his would sit on the throne. Joseph is in line from that side of the family. Now we know that Jesus was born of a virgin, that Joseph was not the father of Jesus. He was his adopted father. That the line of David truly, like in Jesus's humanity, goes through Mary. No problem there. What else? We see that the Jewish community is restored and ruled over mainly by high priests of a very specific family that was set up by David. The high priest is the Zadokite family. We can go back to, in the scriptures, to these various places, and we can see that Joshua is the son of Josedek. Josedek. Do you hear the Zadok part in there? It's the same three, like a ZDK in the sounds at least, which means righteousness. You see that he's listed in Zechariah as well as being of that family. Later on in the records, we have a Zadokite priest named Simon the Just. He's one of the best ones they had, 22-year in that position. And then you see that both of these guys were descendants of Zadok, as set up by David for the new system of temple worship. 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 35, and 1 Kings 2, verse 35. And ironic. So it was no more just sons of Aaron, etc., Gershom, Merari, and the other guy, Kohath. It's even more narrow here now that this family was true to the Davidic dynasty. And so it was the sons of Zadok, specifically, that were to be of the high priestly family. We know that religious life was reorganized under Ezra as well. 4 contributions, 2 were biblical, 2 traditional, as recorded in Jewish rabbinic literature. First 2 here we have that they were regulated in their religious life according to the Torah, according to the law. Ezra made sure that they all fell in line with the ways that things were supposed to be done, and taught everybody very strictly about what was required in the law for Jews living in the land. When these things had been completed, the princes approached me, says Ezra, saying, the people of Israel and the priests and the Levites have not separated themselves from the people of the lands according to their abominations: Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, Jebusites, Ammonites, Moabites, Egyptianites, and Amorites. For they have taken some of their daughters as wives, for they themselves and for their sons, so that the holy race has intermingled with the people in the lands. Indeed, the hand of the princes and the rulers have been foremost in this unfaithfulness. And they confessed it, and then they set everything up and said, no, dudes, we got to do this right. So they did. Second contribution. It's very probable that Ezra, the scribe, writes the religious history of Israel. That means the Chronicles, which we recall were written from a priestly perspective, Ezra, and Nehemiah. Okay? He's a scribe. He's got access to papers, etc. He's probably the author of these. Lays it out for, for perpetuity, all those kinds of things. The last two are the ones that are mostly due to oral tradition. Third here is the organization of the men of the Great Synagogue. This is the list of all the people who signed the document that they were going to behave themselves and do things in a certain way, and made the list. And remember, you were like, there's some lists I want to be on and some lists that I don't want to be on. Where is that? Nehemiah chapter 10? Yeah, signers of the document. They made this agreement. They made these promises. And then you get this big old long list of all these people who were part of the plan. And they were held to the obligations to keep that. Levites, gatekeepers, singers, temple servants, everybody. They were set up to be now like this close community of folks that have agreed to keep these requirements. In some of the Jewish traditional writings of the rabbis, it's called a Mishnah. It's kind of like commentary. Mishnah Avot 1. It describes that this is like constructing a fence around the Torah, a hedge. Okay? This was like, okay, we're going to say who's in and who's out in the plan. And then fourthly, and this is just tradition, I think, they contribute to Ezra the responsibility for having either the authorship or transmission of the oral law to these men of this great synagogue. Now, this means, and he was a scribe, so he appreciated the written word. Oral law means only certain guys know the scriptures, can read it. We see that in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. Most of the people only knew Persian, or they knew a version of Hebrew. They knew like Aramaic, but they hadn't been taught Hebrew. And so these scholars come and they know it. And so you have to listen to them as they translate it, which they did on the day when the law was read. And the idea is that it becomes a thing where you have to go to these guys and they will orally teach you the law. Many traditions got mixed up with that until Jesus' time, where he says, you've heard that it was said, the ancients said, but I say unto you, these rules that they have made up that protect you from breaking the law by making it like even harder. For instance, you don't want to plow on the Sabbath. That's working. So they made a rule that you're not even allowed to drag a stick across the ground, because that's like plowing. It's not, but they would say that would be the deal there. Anyway, by the time Jesus comes around, there's like 513 of these oral tradition laws, 613 laws that everybody's supposed to keep, certain ways to wash your hands, wash your bowls, all that kind of stuff. It's also during this period that we see the rise of the Samaritan schism, this breakaway from a non-traditional Judaism and traditional Judaism. They're an ethnically mixed group, as we saw as we looked at Ezra 4. They were left behind, and Persians were brought in, or really Assyrians were brought in, intermingled with the people who were left over, and voila, you've got the Samaritans. Samaritans are still around today. Here's a picture out of Josephus' book of some modern Samaritans with their version of the Torah. They still celebrate their own kind of Passover, slaughter a lamb up there up on Mount Gerizim, I think it is, and follow their own kind of systems. They're pretty inbred too. They're there's like less than 1,000 of them left. Might be the Horonites. One of the three bad guys was a Horonite in that mix of people. Looks like our 15 minutes are over, so I'll stop there. That's episode 2 of the intertestamental period.